Hey everyone, it's Tommy Stewart Stazeski from the YouTube channel Tom Stewart Drums, and this is my latest installment of my Ranking the Albums series. Today, we are going to dive into dangerous territory by ranking the Rush albums. So let me just preface this by, or preface, is it preface or preface? I don't know. Let me start this by saying Rush for me is in my top 10 favorite bands. Started getting into them as far as buying their albums probably right around Permanent Waves. Again, I was a member of the 1 cent, 10 albums for a penny club, the Columbia House Record and Tape Club. So I got a lot of stuff back then when I was a kid, when I was, 9, 10, 11 years old. If I didn't get it for Christmas or my birthday, then I got it that way. And so Rush for me was always one of those bands that I had heard on the radio. Local Philadelphia radio was playing things like Closer to the Heart. And and Fly By Night. Pretty much just those two songs are the only two that you ever heard on the radio. Maybe Working Man. In the late 70s, there was literally nothing off of Hemispheres that was played on the radio. And there was nothing off of 2112 that was played on the radio. So you really had just those 2 or 3 songs, and that was it. And as a kid, I liked what I heard, but I wasn't, in a position where I could really, dive into them as a band until later on. I had my 4 favorite bands, from like 76 and until like 80. And so for me, it was pretty limited what I could, I was getting albums for Christmas and my birthday, and that was it. By the time I was 9, 10 years old, I started branching out a little bit more and asking for other things, other bands and stuff like that, and actually getting them through Columbia House. So the first Rush record that I actually bought myself was Permanent Waves and then Moving Pictures. And this was in 80 and 81. As a kid I wasn't yet wanting to be a drummer. I was wanting to be a guitar player. But Neil's drumming, like everybody, just, it just sucked you right in. When you heard that, you're like, oh my God, you don't hear anybody playing drums like that on the radio or anywhere really at that point. And so, unless you were into like, fusion and stuff like that, Billy Cobham and, Chick Corea and all that sort of stuff, Weather Report, that was a whole different scene. I had heard Weather Report through my father. He had the Heavy Weather record and a couple of other ones, and he had the Return to Forever, Chick Corea, which I liked as a kid, believe it or not. It was just interesting, weird, spacey kind of music, and I remember I liked Birdland off of Weather Report's record, Heavy Weather. And so it was in my head that I liked sort of proggy, adventurous sort of arrangements of songs, not your typical verse, chorus, solo, verse, out kind of thing. Or, as much as I liked that sort of stuff that was on like AM radio and the Beatles and all that kind of thing, there was something about this music that was different and interesting. And it even resonated with me as a kid. And so when I started getting into Rush, it was kind of like those 2 records, Permanent Waves and Moving Pictures, were sort of like where they were kind of, getting into the radio-friendly territory with the shorter songs and shorter arrangements and a little more attention paid to like hooks and choruses and things. Not catchy choruses, but just, it wasn't just sci-fi, 2112 type of stuff anymore. It was really, they were kind of moving into that other territory, which I think is what attracted me to them as a kid. And so anyway, regardless of that, I got Signals when it came out and when MTV came on the air. Well, I remember seeing on HBO the videos for Farewell to Kings and Hemispheres, and I remember that made an impact on me too. Just seeing the Hemispheres videos for The Trees, and for La Villa Strangiato, Strangiato. I don't know how you pronounce it. La Via Strangiato. I'm going to get flamed for that one in the comments. So what was I saying? Yeah, the exposure I had to those more proggier experimental records was just limited to some videos and stuff that I saw. Don Kirshner's Rock Concert, HBO. And then MTV started playing the videos off of Moving Pictures, which, Limelight and Tom Sawyer, and the live video of Red Barchetta, which blew me away from that Montreal 81 concert. And then Signals came out, and Subdivisions, New World Man. And so I was, getting dragged into the Rush world at a very young age, or around 10, 11 years old. And I got those records or cassettes as they came out. And then it wasn't until I started working at a record and tape distributor in 87. Oh, a little bit before that, because I was buying some 99-cent records at Princeton Record Exchange and places like that. So I did start delving into the earlier catalog, but by the time I was 17 and started working at that place, and I had access to pretty much anything I wanted to listen to. That's when I really got into like Caress of Steel and 2112 and Farewell to Kings and that sort of stuff. And where I just was listening to the whole album and not just the singles or things like that. Again, back then there was no YouTube, there was no streaming. So really, if you didn't own the record, or somebody in your family, your older brother or whoever didn't own the record, your friend or whatever, you just didn't hear that stuff on the radio. And I started really just getting into that earlier 70s Rush stuff. As the 80s stuff was coming out and I was hearing it, things like Presto and, Power Windows and all that stuff, it was okay. You'll see in my rankings the 80s Rush and later is not my preference, but not that they were bad albums, or there was always like good stuff. Like Power Windows, the Big Money is a fucking killer song. I mean, it's like one of my favorite Rush songs because it's got a little bit of everything in. It's got some power chords, it's got the big drumming, and it's not too much keyboards. It's just some flourishes. It's not overwhelming, and they still had some balls, So there were moments in the 80s stuff, that I liked, but by the time of like Hold Your Fire and Presto and Roll the Bones and all that stuff, I was kind of, I was just interested in the old stuff. It was all about the 70s, everything up to like Signals and slightly into Grace Under Pressure. And then after that, it got a little sketchy for me, as you'll see in my rankings. But for me, the mid to late 80s albums, Geddy kind of started talk singing. He wasn't wailing like he was on the earlier stuff. And the lyrics started changing over to like more wordy, like nerdy kind of, I don't want to say social commentary, only because even though that's true, there was social commentary in the earlier albums, stuff like Anthem and all that stuff. And even Something for Nothing and those sort of themes, which, resonated with me, but all that Ayn Rand stuff. But it got, in the 80s, it got almost like corny, and like too wordy. Too many words, Geddy having to talk, sing all this stuff and fit all these long words in, and it was just, it didn't resonate with me. I felt like they were losing. I liked the sci-fi fantasy lyrics of the 70s more than I liked the wordier stuff. And even the halfway point, stuff like Red Barchetta, Free Will, all those things, they're not necessarily sci-fi, but they were cool. They weren't like, they weren't too wordy, and trying to cram too many words into a song or into a verse. It gets awkward. You lose the ability to construct a good melody when you're trying to sing, 50 words in the space that you used to sing maybe 20 words. You could stretch it out, you could create a melody, whatever, and I feel like they lost that. And the albums in the 80s really started to get kind of thin sounding for me. Albums like Presto and Roll the Bones and stuff like that, no bottom end. And the drums got very thin sounding. There was just not a lot of muscle there. Very keyboard heavy. The guitars got very flangy and thin sounding, as Alex has talked about that stuff in interviews and stuff. So I started kind of losing interest during those years, even though that's when I really started going to see the band live. It was really just to hear the old stuff more than anything else. The 2000s albums, like when they late 90s into the 2000s, like when they started putting out like Counterparts and Test for Echo, and then into Clockwork Angels and all that stuff. Clockwork Angels was a lot later, but when they got heavier again with like Counterparts, I liked that. I mean, heavy for heavy's sake is not necessarily good. You got to have the songs, and some of those records had some good songs on them still, but they still weren't up to the level of, for me, like what stuff that was on like Farewell to Kings or Hemispheres or anything like that. But I was glad to see that there were some balls coming back and heavier guitars, less keyboards. It was a step in the right direction. But again, like, you don't want to just be heavy for heavy's sake. And they were kind of like starting to throw in like the down-tuned guitars and like these Rage Against the Machine, grunge, pseudo sort of riffing and some of this sort of stuff, which to me is not Rush, And there was a point where Neil took drum lessons from Benny Greb, or I forget the guy's name, but it was a guy that he wanted to take lessons with for a long time. And I feel like after Neil took these drum lessons, his playing style completely changed. And he didn't sound like Neil anymore to me. He did, but he didn't. As a drummer, I always look for those signature Neil Peart sort of, and he didn't sound like Neil anymore to me. He did, but he didn't. As a drummer, I always look for those signature Neil Peart sort of flourishes in the songs that he was known for. It was his style. You could always count on there being these certain type of tom fills and runs and things like that from Neil in the Rush songs, which really helped make it sound like Rush, much in the way that Keith Moon's style made The Who sound like The Who. And once they got Kenny Jones, who was a phenomenal drummer and it was great in the small faces and the faces, but just a lot more straightforward. And I think The Who might have instructed him to not be as crazy with his drumming as Moon was, but it didn't really sound like The Who anymore. It started to sound like Pete Townsend, like solo albums with Roger Daltrey singing. And a lot of that had to do with the drumming. Entwistle was still there, so you had that element that kept it sounding like The Who as well. But that 1/4 of the chemistry and the sound that was The Who kind of changed once Moon was gone. And I feel like when Neil changed his drumming style, 1/3 of what kind of made Rush sound like Rush kind of started to dissipate a little bit. Not totally, but it just changed. It morphed into something else. And a lot of people probably don't have a problem with that, and I don't necessarily have a problem with it, but it to me, it just didn't sound like classic Rush anymore without that in the mix. I'm not saying that's a good or a bad thing. It's just my observation, and everybody has their own preferences. So getting back to the rankings, I'm going to start at the bottom with my least favorite Rush records. Least favorite doesn't mean necessarily bad. It just means they're not as good as the cream of the crop as usual. Some of these are, I don't want to say they're bad, but there's like 2 or 3 songs on the record that I like, and the rest of it is just kind of, it's just there. It's like filler, There are different things about these records, and I'll go into it, why they're ranked where they are. Some of it has to do with just that maybe one of the albums has a few songs on it that I would take over any other song on one of the records lower than that, and you'll see I'm going to get into that now. So at the bottom of my list, by my count, it looks like there's 19 studio albums. God forbid I forgot one of them. I don't think I did. This is just purely studio records. I'm not going to go into the live records. I'll briefly mention the live records at the end of this video and what my favorite live records from them. There's so many freaking live records they put out, from all this R40 stuff and Rock in Rio and whatever. I'm going to just kind of skim over that at the very end of this video, what I prefer as far as their live releases. But for now, this is just the studio records. So coming in at number 19 is, and this is going to probably get me flamed, is from 2002, Vapor Trails. Now, I do prefer the remixed version over the original version, which was brick walled and distorted and just, was borderline like Metallica's was the Saint Anger record that had that harsh sort of production value. Not quite as bad as that, but I think the remixed version it sounds tighter, cleaner, more separation. You can hear all the instruments better. And so if I'm going to listen to that record at all, it's going to be the remixed re-release. One Little Victory, I'm not crazy about the song. It's one of the better songs on the record, but it's not like, it didn't blow me away when I heard it. I was like, okay, this is heavy Rush, heavy riffs, but again, a lot of the stuff lacks the signature stuff that I'm looking for from Rush. It's, I don't know. It's a tough one. I don't like saying these things, but it's kind of like, if I'm being honest. Other songs on the record I like: Ceiling Unlimited, Secret Touch, Earthshine. But I don't feel like it's a strong record all the way through as far as, songs that just grab me, whether it's the arrangements or the hooks or whatever it is. I feel like, again, it's just an attempt to be heavy for heavy's sake. Sometimes that's okay, and other times I just feel like it's kind of, it's an exercise in just trying to be heavy, and not. The songwriting itself is just as important to me as how heavy or how sonically what the record sounds like. And so Vapor Trails to me is lacking a little bit in the song department. So that's why I have it at 19. Next up, number 18 would be Roll the Bones from 1991. Songs that I like on this record: Dreamline.
Roadmap to Jupiter, radar fix on the stars, all along the highway. She's got a liquid crystal compass, picture book of the rivers under the Sahara. They travel in the time of the prophets on the desert highway, straight to the heart of the sun. Like lovers and heroes, I'm the restless part of everyone. We're only at home and we're on the run. On the run.
Bravado, which I always thought was a really good song. They used to do that live a lot. And Bravado's kind of got like this Michael Penn sort of 80s/90s pop sort of vibe to it, the way that it's written. But I think it's a good song.
We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. Oh, oh, oh.
Big Wheel, Ghost of a Chance. Roll the Bones. The rap section kills it for me. I mean, it's not terrible. It's just not, again, it's not what I want from Rush. It's kind of one of those, I know, we're going to do something that's going to, not what everybody expects. And that's the whole idea and purpose behind it. I get that. It's just, it was cheesy to me. Just cheesy. Yeah. The rest of the song's not that bad, but a lot of substandard treading water kind of stuff on this record, like stuff like Neurotica, You Bet Your Life, and things like that. I just, nothing really just reaches out and grabs me on the record, if I'm being honest. Next up on the list, I think, is 17. Presto from 1989. I believe that's the first tour that I saw the band live. Not proud of that. I wanted to go to Signals. Wanted to go to Grace Under Pressure, wanted to go to Power Windows. Various reasons I just couldn't go. When you're a young teenager and you're not yet driving You know, you're relying on other people to go to these shows. You're not working yet. You're still in high school or grade school. You know, you got to pick your battles. And during those years, you know, 81, 84, 80, I was in full-blown hard rock metal mode. You know, Kiss was still one of my favorite bands. AC/DC. You know, I was going to, like, you know, Rat shows and, you know, like things like that. I was, you know, starting to get interested in the female species, the female gender of our species, however you want to word it. And so by like a time I was 14, 15, 16, I wanted to go to these rock concerts and I wanted to look at girls and I wanted to, like, you know, just be part of that whole rock vibe, you know. And so I had to pick my battles. You know, I couldn't go to every concert that came through town, even though I went to a lot. Rush was kind of like, I'll get around to seeing them one of these days. In my mind, in like 1985, 84, 86, 87, I was kind of like, the best Rush shows already happened. The best Rush tours already happened. I don't like these newer records all that much. They're not doing a lot of the old stuff live anymore. So, am I going to go? But I ended up finally going to Presto, and I actually really liked that tour. It was just cool to see them live. I had never seen them. And obviously, I wish I'd seen them back in the day. They played the Tower with Cheap Trick opening in '77 on Farewell to Kings. And, oh my God, and talking of early tours of Rush, not to go off on a tangent here because I'm a Kiss guy. When Rush opened for Kiss in '74 and '75, I mean, like, they must have played the Philly, Jersey area, 10 times. You know, you could have gone to see them between late '74 and like summer of '75. And it kills me. Rush on Caress of Steel, Rush on Fly By Night, and then you had Kiss touring towards the end of '74, Hotter Than Hell, and then into Dress to Kill, which was the basis for the Alive, you know, album. You know, that's the time period they were recording all those shows. To see those two bands in their freaking prime, I mean, like, Rush to me on that time period, not necessarily their prime, but really just in '75. I mean, it would have been amazing to see those shows. But anyway, getting back to Presto. Yeah, this is 1980. This is number 17 on my list. Show Don't Tell. It's good. Title track is decent. The Pass, War Paint, the rest of it I could give or take. Honestly, it's why it's at the bottom of the list. Again, a thin sounding record. Even if these records were remastered, I'm not even sure I would pick them up. I don't know. I don't like them enough to really know if I would spend the money to buy a remastered version of Presto or Roll the Bones or anything like that. Especially a gigantic box set that's $230. Forget it. It's not happening. That's reserved for like Signals and everything back. And Grace Under Pressure, I'm still on the fence about whether I want to spend that kind of money for the remaster of that. I wish they would put out a 2 CD version. Maybe they will. Next up on the list, number 16, would be Snakes and Arrows from 2007. The logo on the cover is kind of a throwback to the Grace Under Pressure Rush logo on the cover of that record, which is kind of cool. Songs on this record that I like: Far Cry, Armor and Sword, Working Them Angels, We Hold On. All decent songs. Again, it was good to hear Rush get heavy again on these later records.
So long, 'cause there's a chance that we might not be so wrong. We could be
A lot of the later records to me are kind of interchangeable. You know, I might like Snakes and Arrows as much as I like, I don't know, Clockwork Angels or whatever. You know, they're kind of very similar. None of them stand head and shoulders above any of the other ones for me as far as the releases from the 2000s and the 90s. But for the sake of putting them in order, I'm kind of having to look at that. Now, going back to why I might have Presto and Roll the Bones rated above Vapor Trails. You know, I maybe only like 3 or 4 songs on Vapor Trails. Same with Roll the Bones and Presto. But if I had to pick between, you know, the rest of my life, I could only listen to the songs I like off of Vapor Trails or the songs I like off of Presto or Roll the Bones. Well, I would rather hear Dreamline and Bravado or Show Don't Tell over anything on Vapor Trails. That's just being honest. I think they're better songs. They're wimpier, they're thinner, but as far as songwriting goes, and what I like in a song, melody and hook, and you know, just overall, you know, arrangement and stuff like that. Those songs that I like on Roll the Bones and Presto, I think, are just better songs than anything on Vapor Trails. Vapor Trails is heavier. Again, heavier doesn't necessarily equate better in my mind. Would I like Roll the Bones and Presto to be heavier records? Yeah, I think those songs would benefit from a heavier sound and production. It would elevate them. But for now, it is what it is. You know, it's that's my reasoning behind it, and flame away. So that was, let's see, 1980s, 16. I believe this is, I'm going to number them on the screen because I'm losing track of what number these are. So whatever I rate, the number will be on the screen on below. Next up is Test for Echo from 1996. An attempt of them to get heavy again after Counterparts for the 90s. Title track's good. Driven, Half the World, The Color of Right, Resist. I like those songs on this record.
With all the things I can't explain,
again, with a lot of these later records, there's 4, maybe 5 songs that stand out, and the rest of it is just kind of filler to me. I don't go back to them very often. You know, they're not. If I was going to make Rush compilation, you know, playlists or stuff like that, there'd only be a couple of these songs on the playlist. If I'm going to be completely honest, for people that got into Rush at a later time than I did, I'm sure that's sacrilege. You know, again, it all comes down to when you jumped on the train. You know, for me, it was, you know, 79, 80-ish, right around there. And somebody that got into the band in like 87, 88, 89, they're going to prefer this stuff over the 70s hippie, sci-fi sort of borderline hard, you know, like people kind of classified them as prog metal, but I don't think they're really metal, but people kind of look at that early stuff that way. Next one up, Clockwork Angels from 2012, Freudian slip there. I like the wreckers on this record. It's kind of a throwback to the late 80s, but heavier. You know, that's probably my favorite song on the record.
good to be true. All I know is that sometimes the truth is contrary. Everything in life you thought you knew. All I know is that sometimes you have to be wary, 'cause sometimes the target is you. Driven to ground with that awful sound.
And then Caravan is decent. The chorus kind of has a Signals sort of vibe to it. Be You to Be is okay. Kind of sounds like a Rage Against the Machine riff to me, which I don't really want to hear that from Rush, but I get that, you know, when you're trying to be heavy, it's going to happen. That's kind of the riffing you're going to do. The title track's good. The Anarchist, Carnies. Clockwork Angels, That's, I mean, that's for that to be their final studio record with Neil, I feel is it's a decent way to go out. I rate that above the other ones I mentioned earlier. For just, it has more songs on it that I prefer. Next up, Hold Your Fire from 1987. On this record, Force 10, Time Stands Still, Open Secrets, Prime Mover. They're like probably my favorite songs on the record.
But I want to look around me now. Time stands still. See more of the people and the places that surround me now. Time stands still. Freeze this moment a little bit longer. Make each sensation a little bit stronger. Experience slips away. Experience slips away. Time stands still.
I don't like Second Nature, Tai Shan. There's stuff on this record that's just the shits to me, as far as it's just not, they got very inconsistent on some of these 80s records for me. Again, thinner sounding production, wordy lyrics. Geddy changed the way he started singing. He's now kind of like talk singing. And, the reason I have it ranked higher than some of the other ones is, songs like Force 10 and Time Stands Still are great songs. And I feel like even just on the strength of those two songs, I would rather listen to that than anything I've, rated underneath of it. Again, it gets hard to put these in order because, is Hold Your Fire that much better than Test for Echo or Snakes and Arrows? No, it's just they're kind of occupying the same territory in my head as far as where they land. But, again, for the sake of ranking them, I have to pick and choose. And so that's why some of these are where they are. Next up would be Counterparts, the big return to the heavy Rush sound from 1993. It's a great sounding record. Thick, a good blend of heavy guitars and the flangey sort of 80s guitar sound, a good mixture of the two. A solid, thick, heavy drum mix, which I like as a drummer. The songs animate, great, Stick It Out, Cut to the Chase, Between the Sun and Moon, Leave That Thing Alone is a cool instrumental, Everyday Glory. It's out of the 90s and later records, that's the highest rated one for me. It just has a great sound to it. After all the thin 90s and late 80s sounding records, to hear this was just like, wow.
Polarize me, sensitize me, criticize me, civilize me, compensate me, animate me, complicate me, elevate me. Goddess in my garden, sister in my soul.
And grunge was happening in 93. You had Stone Temple Pilots out yet? I'm not sure. 93, you had like Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, King's X, I think, had just put out Dogman, which is a great King's X record too. And they did the same thing. They got heavy, they downtuned. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, again, but I thought this was a good, solid, heavy Rush record for the time, the time frame. Okay, so next, Power Windows from 1985. Now, putting Power Windows above Counterparts was a tough decision because Counterparts is a much better sounding record. It's heavy, it's more rock, But the thing about Power Windows, is that Howard Jones on the cover, by the way? I don't know. It was 1985. It could be. Maybe maybe the artist, I don't know who did the artwork for it, but maybe that's what they were. It looks like Howard Jones sitting in front of a window. Grand Designs, Marathon, Mystic Rhythms, Middletown Dreams, all, decent mid-'80s Rush songs.
From first to last, the peak is never past. Something always fires the light that gets in your eyes. One moment high, and glory rolls on by, like a streak of lightning, that flashes and fades in the summer sky.
The Big Money is the big winner. Big Money, just one of the best Rush songs, just killer.
It's the power and the glory, it's a war in paradise, a Cinderella story on a tumble of the dice. Big money goes around the world, big money take a cruise, big money leave a mighty wake, big money live a bruise, big money make a million dreams, big money spin big deals, big money make a mighty hand, big money spinning wheels, big money got a heavy hand, big money take control, big money got a mean streak, big money got no soul.
Especially that end, the outro, the whole last minute of the song, where it's just instrumental, and Neil is changing up the drum fills every pass through. He's changing what he's doing, and it's killer. It's genius. It's powerful. It's like the last gasp of old school Rush to me, anyway. Not old school like in the sense of Fly By Night or anything, but old school in the sense that, after Power Windows, and then you get into Hold Your Fire, and the Big Money is heavier and bigger sounding than anything on Hold Your Fire or Roll the Bones or Presto or anything. So to me, that's like the last hurrah, even though the rest of the record was really keyboard heavy, which I'm not crazy about. But for me, the Big Money alone is worth ranking that record above anything that came underneath of it. For me, I would take the Big Money over anything off of any of the records afterwards if I had to choose. Desert Island, you can only listen to one song the rest of your life. Is it going to be Big Money or something off of the records below it in this ranking? It's going to be Big Money. I'll take that any day. Next up, Grace Under Pressure from 1984. The Body Electric.
One humanoid escapee, one android on the run, seeking freedom beneath the lonely desert sun, trying to change its program, trying to change the mode, crack the code, images conflicting into data overload. 10-0-1-0-0-1.
Red Sector A, Distant Early Warning, After Image, all good songs on this record.
You can face the knowledge that the truth is not the truth.
It's really where they started to make the change into the 80s. Well, I mean, some would argue Moving Pictures and Signals were, but this started really incorporating more of the Simmons drums, thinner guitar sound, more of the Police pseudo reggae kind of rhythms and stuff like that they were definitely starting to lean towards by this point. You could tell they were big Police fans, and they were incorporating that into the music, and the production on it started getting more 80s centric.
One North American band has sold over 1 million albums in Britain alone. Rush, Grace Under Pressure.
The world waits on my shoulder.
From their fine new album, Rush, Canada at its best.
1001.
Get an extra 50 pence off Def Leppard Pyromania or Rush, Grace Under Pressure at selected record shops now. See this week's sounds for full details.
It's interesting what I've heard of the Terry Brown remixes of Grace Under Pressure. The clarity on the original mix of Grace Under Pressure to me is cleaner and clearer and brighter. But I like what Terry Brown did in kind of boosting up the drums. They're a little, more like a room sound versus a fake 80s reverb. The snare is a little thicker. Everything is a little drier. To me, he's making Grace Under Pressure sound similar to maybe what Signals sounds like. It's what Grace Under Pressure probably would have sounded like if they continued with him as their producer instead. There's things I like about it. There's things I don't like about it. Again, the original mix of Grace Under Pressure is a little brighter and clearer. Typically, I like that better, but I like the muscle that Terry Brown is kind of incorporating. It's a little muddier, which is weird, but it's a little thicker and a little more muscular. So I like things about both. The next one up would be the debut Rush album from 1974. John Rutsey on drums changed the whole game. Changed once Rutsey was out and Neil came in on many levels. Obviously, the drumming. Rutsey's a good, solid rock drummer. Not anything against him. Rest his soul. He was good for what the band needed at that time. But the reality is if Rutsey was never. If he was he fired or did he leave? I don't remember. But either way, if you did not have Neil come in with his lyrics and his drumming, none of the records after the Rush debut album would have either existed or sounded anything like they did. Obviously, this goes back to the argument people make about David Lee Roth and Sammy Hagar, which drives me crazy. I'm a Roth guy. I like Hagar, like his solo stuff. I like 5150. I like some of the stuff that he did with Van Halen. Different band. People like to argue that Van Halen would have been better if Sammy was the singer on the debut record instead of Dave, because he's got a better voice, whatever. Well, first of all, Dave's Ian Gillan scream on those early Van Halen records is fucking killer, and it's better than anything Sammy Hagar. I don't care that Sammy Hagar has a higher range vocally. That scream is Van Halen, okay? That's Van Halen. That's, besides Eddie, of course. take that out of the equation, and you take Dave's lyrics out of the equation, and you take all the melody lines, the vocal melodies and the chorus melodies that were all David Lee Roth, that Eddie and the band handed him the music. He took the music and he created the hooks, the lyrics, the song titles. So first of all, nothing on Van Halen 1 would have had any of the same song titles. They would have had none of the same hooks, and they would have had none of the same lyrics, because that's all David Lee Roth. So to say that they would have been better with Sammy Hagar or bigger, they might have been one and done. I mean, it might have been just like another Montrose record, killer guitar player, some great heavy rock songs because of the riffs and stuff, and there's no denying, you know, songs like the riffs on like I'm on Fire and, you know, I'm the One, Running with the Devil. Those riffs would have still been there, but if the hooks weren't good and the lyrics weren't good and they weren't catchy, that record could have been a one and done, or maybe Van Halen might have done a couple of records just like Montrose did. There would have been no hits. Eddie would have just been known as this cult guitar hero. He maybe would have went on to do instrumental records like an Yngwie, or who the hell knows. But this, I'm getting off track here, but going back to John Rutsey, the first Rush record has great songs on it. Working Man, Finding My Way, What You're Doing in the Mood. It's them in their Zeppelin mode, you know. Great hard rock record. But the band, once he was out and they brought Neil in, it was the opposite of Van Halen. It was like all of a sudden now you had this new guy come in who just changed the game completely for the band. Lyrics, drumming, song titles, direction. They went more proggy as they went along with stuff like By Tour on Fly By Night. Fly By Night was like that transitional record from the first record in between that and Caress of Steel. And just, it was a different band, and that was the Rush that ended up becoming huge and connecting with everybody. You take Neil out of that equation, and God knows how many records they might have done. Maybe 2 or 3, or they might have just been good, solid rock records like the debut record is, and that's it. You would have not had, think about it, you would have not had Tom Sawyer, you would have not have had Fly By Night, you would have not had 2112, Closer to the Heart, Hemisphere. None of that stuff would have existed without Neil in the band. So to me, as great as the first record, Rush record is, for those handful of songs, it's just a good, solid, hard rock record. Different animal than the rest of them, and I have it ranked kind of high because I like that record better than any of the 90s or 2000s stuff, because it's still just a killer freaking record, whether Neil's on it or not. That's the game changer. That is like that. After, that's before the first album and after. It's like before Christ and after. It's everything changed after that. All right, so next up, now we get into the home stretch here. And this is where it gets tough, because some of these records I love almost equally as the other. But again, you know, I have reasons that they're in this order, and this next one's probably going to drive some people fucking batshit crazy. But my next one up would be Permanent Waves from 1980. Spirit of Radio, classic, obviously. Entre Nous, another classic. I've played on the radio a little bit. I'm not sure if it was a single. Yeah, it's a killer song. It's one of my favorite Rush songs, but I don't think it wasn't a big single or anything like that, big song.
Just between us, I think it's time for us to recognize the differences we sometimes fear to show. Just between us, I think it's time for us to realize the spaces in between. Leave room for you and I to grow. Sliding panels and illusion show.
Free Will, big FM radio song.
A planet of playthings, we dance on the strings of powers we cannot perceive. The stars aren't aligned, or the gods are aligned. Blame is better to give than receive. You can choose a ready guide in some celestial voice. If you choose not to decide, you still have made a choice. You can choose from phantom fears and kindness that can kill. I will choose a path that's clear. I will choose free will.
And those three on Permanent Waves are really the strongest three songs on the record for me. It was definitely the transition between the proggy hemispheres and what was going to come later with next with Moving Pictures. The shorter songs, a little catchier. For me, everybody loves Natural Science. I prefer Cygnus Book 1 and 2, Cygnus X1, off of, and as well as La Villa Strangiato. I prefer those over Natural Science any day of the week. Natural Science is good, but I feel like it's them stretching for ideas and kind of putting the big long epic on the record out of obligation more than inspiration. To me, other people might worship that song, and I'm sure there are people that do. But to me, it was the last gasp of, okay, this is the last time we're going to do like a whole epic. Let's do it. And it just wasn't as, it doesn't connect with me. It's not bad. I like it, but it's not one that I go back to very often. It's the one I'm least familiar with because I don't listen to that as much as the stuff that was on Hemispheres and Farewell to Kings. And even if you want to talk 2112, that, not even close. So, yeah, that's why I have Permanent Waves listed where it is, because for me, it's really about all those three songs, Spirit of Radio, Entre Nous, and Free Will. So that's why it lands where it lands. Could have landed higher, but my next choice, I actually like more songs on this next choice than I do on Permanent Waves.
Big News, the new album from Rush. Pick it up. See Rush live at the Royal Highland Exhibition Centre, Ingliston, on May 24th and 25th.
Get up midnight to salvation. We arrive at the launching site.
You'll hear great songs from their album, Signals.
Nearing dawn.
That's why it ranks higher, and that would be Signals from 82. Analog Kid, Chemistry, Countdown, Subdivisions, New World Man, Digital Man. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's 6 songs on Signals that I fucking love versus 3 songs on Permanent Waves, which I also love. You could say Spirit of Radio, Entre Nous, and Free Will blow away any of those songs on Signals, but I'm kind of going with what's giving me more bang for my buck, and for me, it's Signals. I hate to say it. I love the way the record sounds. It's got a great drum sound on it. It's just thick. That and Moving Pictures, the two best sounding kick drum sounds from Neil on it. They're just they pound you in the chest. It's a great organic drum sound, a lot of room sound, not fake reverb like processed. It's just, you could tell they had room mics and they used it and mixed it in with the drum sound to make the drum sound a little bit like bigger. And I know the Signals is the record with the keyboard started coming in, and Alex sort of started to like get more flangey with his guitar, the cleaner sound. I get all that, but Analog Kid, fucking killer.
Big sensation quickens in his young and restless heart, and the bright nameless vision has him longing to depart. You move me with your buildings and your eyes, autumn woods and winter skies. You move me, open sea and city lights, busy streets and dizzy heights. Call me.
Chemistry, killer. Signal transmitted, message received. Reaction making impact invisibly. Countdowns, killer. Lit up with anticipation, we arrive at the launching site. The sky is still dark, nearing dawn on the Florida coastline. Circling choppers slash the night with roving searchlight beams. This magic day when super science mingles with the bright stuff of dreams.
We had a soldier test center, and then they are go for launch. Columbia is now steering push precise window in space for main engine cutoff. Mark 240 seconds. Columbia now 39 nautical miles to altitude, 42 nautical miles downrange.
Subdivisions obviously is a great single, was a great video song and everything. New World Man's kind of like got the Police vibe going on. Digital Man is great. The riffs on this record are great. Forgetting that it's starting to be the keyboard heavy record, it's just I think it's a fucking underrated great record. I'm sorry. That's why it's landing where it's landing. Now, that and Permanent Waves, yeah, you can interchange them on my list. You know, that was a very tough one to figure out which one was going to go where. Because everything on top of this is a no-brainer for me, but Signals and Permanent Waves was a tough choice. And, you know, I might change my mind a month from now. I don't know. But for now, that's the way it stands. Next up is the big breakthrough record for them as far as FM radio, which would be Moving Pictures, 1981. The second record I ever got from them through the Columbia Record House.
Everybody got mixed feelings. Everybody got mixed feelings.
And, Tom Sawyer, Limelight, Red Barchetta, Camera Eye, Vital Signs, YYZ. For me on this record, it's all about Red Barchetta. That's my favorite fucking song on the record. And it's one of my favorite songs ever from them. It's genius from start to finish. From the live Exit Stage Left version is killer too. It used to be on MTV. That video on MTV is burned into my brain just from seeing it so many times and just loving it to death.
Turbo slows to cross the borderline. Running like the wind of excitement, shivering up and down my spine. But now that they're gone, my uncle deserved me an old machine. Oh, the audience, forgive me, as new has been his dear
That's in my top 10 Rush songs, and maybe even top 5. I mean, it's hard to narrow it down, but obviously Tom Sawyer, is sick to death of it. It's one of those songs. I don't need to hear Rock and Roll All Night anymore. I don't need to hear I Want You to Want Me anymore. Don't need to hear anything from the first Guns N' Roses record anymore, or anything from Guns N' Roses anymore for that matter. It's in that Walk This Way, category of, okay, killer song. Do I need to hear it ever again? No. But I still love it, for the drum breaks, and it's fucking great. So the synths, and it's great. Limelight's killer.
Intact, living in the limelight, the universal dream for those who wish to see, those who wish to be must put aside the alienation.
And so next above that is A Farewell to Kings from 1977. Just alone for Xanadu,
Searching for the lost Xanadu. To stand within the pleasure dome decreed by Kubla Khan, to taste anew the fruits of life, the last immortal man, find the sacred river realm, to walk the caves of night. Oh, I will dine on honeydew and drink the milk of
title track, Cinderella Man, Closer to the Heart, radio classic.
When they turn the pages of history, when these days have passed long ago, will they read of us with sadness for the seeds that we let grow? We turned our gaze from the castles in the distance, eyes cast down on the path of least resistance. Cities full of hatred, fear, and lies, with their hearts and cruel tormented eyes. Philosophers and plowmen, each must know his part to sow a new mentality closer to the heart. Yes, closer to the heart. Yeah. Oh.
Cygnus X1, Book 1, Killer. It's a prog classic, hands down. It's Xanadu is just brilliant. I love the synth in that, the acoustics. It's just it still has that 70s sci-fi blend of the lyrics that are sci-fi oriented and just the mix, the production of it. You're starting to get the synths, but they're like cool, spacey 70s synths. They're not like cheesy 80s synths, so I'm okay with that. I'm fine with that. Yeah, just a great record. When you listen to Farewell to Kings, there's just no denying it's one of the best Rush records. So next up from Farewell to Kings is Caress of Steel from 1975. The record that nearly killed the band and got them dropped from Mercury, the record label. Bastille Day. Lakeside Park, I think I'm going bald. The shorter songs on the record. Bastille Day is a live classic. It's on All the World's a Stage, and Lakeside Park, I think they were doing back then too. But the real attraction for this record is the Necromancer and the Fountain of Lamneth, the two epics. Two songs, actually the whole record, you should really listen to with headphones, but those two epic tracks especially are headphone songs.
Raid from the necromancer, shadows through the sky, another land to darken, feeble resurrect.
hear shit you just don't hear listening to it in your car or on your iPhone or on your computer speakers or whatever, you know. Even if you're listening on a good audiophile system at home, you put headphones, a good set of headphones on, and listen to that record. And stuff that's being panned left to right, the guitars, the drums, the drum solo on that record where the drums are moving from one side to the other in your ears. Clarity. It's a great sounding record. It's so clear and punchy and heavy and natural sounding. You know, it doesn't sound processed or anything.
I am born. I am me. I am new. I am free. Look at me. I am young, sight unseen, life unsung.
For 1975, the record is just such a well-produced, well-recorded record, and it's such a weird record. You know, the record label was going to drop them because nobody got it. I mean, there's funny interviews with Alex Lifeson talking about when they were on tour with Kiss, when they, getting ready to release Caress of Steel, and Alex had an advance copy of the record, and they were all excited to play for the guys in Kiss, and they gave it to them. They played it for them in one of the hotel rooms or whatever. And Alex says, they just had this, especially, he goes, Paul Stanley especially just had this look of confusion on their faces, and Paul Stanley said, like, I don't get what you're doing. I don't get it. It's right over his head, which is hilarious because, Kiss was, all about, singing about the women, basically. Not all their songs, but, you had Kiss, very bare bones rock and roll, and then Rush, some of their stuff was bare bones rock and roll, but they were starting to morph into the prog band that they became when they were on the road with Kiss. And, you couldn't get more different approaches to music. Both great at what they do, but it's just funny that, and Caress of Steel was a flop, so it confused a lot of other people too. There was literally nothing on there that was going to get played on the radio. They ended up coming back from that Under the Pressure. Well, what's interesting is the next record on my list is 2112 from 1976, the follow-up to Caress of Steel. Now, some would argue, and Rush have said, well, we were told we needed to, we better deliver the goods this time or we were going to be dropped. And so we decided to say, fuck you, and just do 2112 with a side-along epic and sci-fi epic and all that stuff. But 2112 is a much more accessible record than Caress of Steel, as proggy as it is in spots, and the whole 2112, epic. The songs, there were shorter songs, Passage to Bangkok, Twilight Zone, Tears was a ballad, Something for Nothing. Lessons. They were shorter songs, more in the vein of kind of what was on like Fly By Night.
Sweet memories flashing very quickly by, reminded me and giving me a reason why. I know that my goal is more than a thought. I'll be there when I teach what I've been taught, and I've been taught. We've told you before, but you didn't hear us there.
The exception of the 2112 epic that filled up the whole one side of the album. Temples of Syrinx, just great stuff. I mean, just so sci-fi, futuristic. The album cover is killer, one of my favorites. Them in the kimonos is funny. I'm sure they hate it, but everything about the record, from the cover to what's on the record itself, and the production of it is killer. It was definitely a step in the right direction from Caress of Steel. Caress of Steel was the bridge between Fly By Night and 2112, kind of like feeling everything out. And 2112 was the realization, and it was a big record for them. It really saved their career. And I think it was just the right timing for them. 1976, it was just, it was right when Logan's Run came out. Star Wars hadn't come out yet, but there was this move toward in society of being into like sci-fi stuff and everything around that time. So I think that helped a lot.
The sleep is still in my eyes, the dream is still in my head. I heave a sigh and sadly smile and lie a while in bed. I wish that it might come to pass, not fade like all my dreams. Just think of what my life might be in a world like I have seen. I don't think I can carry on this cold and empty life. Oh, no.
Moving up the list, next would be Fly By Night from 1975.
Why try? Now why? This feeling inside me says it's time I was gone. Clear head, life ahead. It's time I was keen, now not just from my fun. Fly by night away from here, change my life again. Fly by night, goodbye my dear. My ship isn't coming and I just can't pretend.
This band's second record. And for me, it builds on what the debut was and adds in Neil's drumming and Neil's lyrics, this sci-fi sort of proggy element to things like By Tour and the Snow Dog was really kind of like a precursor to what was going to come later.
Tons of ladies live by flickering torchlight. The netherworld is gathered in the glare. Prince Vitor takes a cavern to the north light.
But the song Fly By Night, killer straight up hard rock song, anthem, amazing. Just the riff, the drumming, anthem is just fucking incredible. Best I Can, great. Beneath, Between and Behind, In the End, Making Memories. Like, the whole record is awesome. I love it.
Once when held they sang out to the sky while to their shadow now. Once the cities rise, another ship arises, melting pots and ever growing. I can see what you mean. It just shines longer, and I can feel what you feel. It just makes you stronger.
Great sounding record. It's guitar heavy. The drums are all, just amazing on it, of course. And it was the bridge between the first record and Caress of Steel. Not as weird as Caress of Steel and not as basic as the first record. I don't know. There's something about Fly By Night that just connects with me. I love the record. It's ballsy, it's heavy, and yet it's got the elements of Rush that the prog sort of was creeping in a little bit at this point. So, yeah, that's number 2 on my list. The only one left, of course, is Hemispheres from 1978. Again, there's something about this record that just connects with me, between the production and the mix, the sound of it, the sci-fi sort of elements to the lyrics. Cygnus X1 Book 2 is probably my favorite as far as the one-side epics. It's a cross between that and La Villa Strangiato.
truth of love be lighted. Let the love of truth shine clear. Sensibility, armed with sense and liberty, with the heart and mind united in a single perfect sphere.
As far as the long epics go, Cygnus X1 Book 2 and La Via Strangiato are two of my all-time favorites. Circumstances is killer on this record. Trees, a classic, you know, just the lyrics, and, you know, the lyrics were wordy, but not wordy in the way that Neil got later on. Just, you know, this is the right balance of everything. enough guitars. The drumming on the record is off the charts great. I love the way the record sounds. It's a great album cover. It was one of my earlier exposures to Rush, seeing the videos from this on HBO in like 78 into 79. I got a taste of this whole record when I had borrowed a cassette off of a friend of mine, and this whole record was on like side 2 of whatever I borrowed, whatever cassette I borrowed from him. He taped it off the album. And I remember hearing this and just be like, oh my God, this is like, it just blew me away. It's always been in my top 3 Rush records. Again, when you start getting into the top 3, top 5 Rush records, any of these could be interchangeable. I mean, there's been times where Caress of Steel, you know, might have been where Fly By Night is, you know, or 2112 might have been where Fly By Night is, or vice versa. You know, the first 4 or 5 on my list here are so close together, it's almost impossible to rank them, but this is my final order. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this video. I want to talk about their live records a little bit. The later live records are good, you know, but they're different animals to me. You know, the Live in Rio and R40, and there was another one too. All these double discs, double DVDs, these DVD sets that came out. For me, if you're talking about the classic Rush records, the live records from, you know, like the first 3 or 4 that came out. For me, I like Exit Stage Left probably the best. Actually, no. My favorite Rush live record is not something that was released separately. It was part of the Different Stages live album, and it's the Hammersmith Odeon show on Farewell to Kings tour. That's my favorite Rush live recording that's been officially released by them. It's just killer. It sounds great. It's heavy. It's raw. It's better than All the World's a Stage for me. So that would probably be my favorite Rush live release, followed by probably Exit Stage Left. Some people say that it was a fake live record that was recorded at Soundcheck or in the studio with audience noise overdubbed, you know, but there's barely any audience noise on it. I don't think it is. I just think, I mean, they were just that good. You know, they might have done some sweetening in the studio on it, but it's a great sounding record, and the live versions of Tom Sawyer and Red Barchetta on there alone make it great. All the World's a Stage I like because it's the earlier material, but I feel like the record is lacking in a little bit of bottom end. It's a little thin sounding for me. I don't like the quality of the recording. I feel like they could have done a better job on the mix on that record. But those are the top 3 for me. Then I really like the live in St. Louis 1980, which was a bonus disc on, I think, the Moving Pictures or maybe the Hemispheres deluxe edition, and the live YYZ 1981. There's a bonus disc on the Moving Pictures. I like those live recordings as well. You know, anything pre-Signals to me is up there. Anything that came after that, I'm okay with, but you're not going to touch, you know, those classic early recordings for me. And I'm hoping that they eventually release some more stuff from the vaults at some point. You know, it'd be nice to get a live series of classic recordings. I'm sure they did a ton of recordings for these live records. They had to record more than just Massey Hall for All the World's a Stage. You know, hopefully there's some stuff in the vaults that's going to come out at some point down the road. And so looking forward to that. Yeah, so if you enjoyed this ranking the Rush albums, comment below, like and subscribe to my channel. Feel free to put your own lists down the bottom. Feel free to flame me for any of my crazy opinions or agree with me if you feel inclined to do so. Again, this is just opinion. Everybody lands on a different spot on this stuff, depending on where you came in and what connects with you and what doesn't. It's just my personal opinion. It means nothing. Coming up soon, I'm going to be doing a ranking the albums of AC/DC and Kiss and the greatest live albums of all time. Also Thin Lizzy, I think I'm going to be doing soon. So yeah, these take a long time to do, editing and all that stuff. So, you know, I'm trying to put out a few a month if I can manage to get around to it. But thanks for watching, and see you soon.